You have to create a movement within a movement. Those people, those artists, those collectors that still prize those ideals, I think eventually are just going to have to come together and say, you know what, we're going to do this on our own. We're going to build our own movement in parallel. And we're going to rebuild the community around those shared beliefs and values.
On this episode of The Collector's Call, we host Ohms, a passionate supporter of crypto art. He champions the cypherpunk ideals of privacy, self-sovereignty, and the freedom to transact, uplifting artists who embody these values. He advocates for freedom of expression and challenges collectors to seek out art that exhibits courage rather than conformity. Let's dive into this conversation.
Ohms, what does crypto art mean to you?
Wow, that's a big question to start with. I mean, for me, crypto art, it's an ethos. It's an energy. It's a vibe. It's something you can tell. You just know it when you see it. And I always go back to cypherpunk principles because at the end of the day, crypto in itself was inspired by cypherpunk ideals. And it was created as a kind of response to the encroachment of government, of the establishment of privacy being lost, of future threats to privacy, and empowering the individual, sovereignty, freedom to transact, and all these things. So I think of it really rooted in those kind of ideals. But then I also think of it in terms of courage, the ability to speak freely as an artist, to embody those ideals through the work, but also through your own personality, to highlight the things that make crypto so impactful and have such a powerful potential for the whole world. So I don't think it's enough for an artist to just slap a logo, like a Bitcoin logo, in their work and say, okay, that's crypto art. I don't think it's enough. I think there needs to be a bit more impetus, a bit more intent there. There needs to be a stronger message. It needs to be something that really kind of inspires you. And so, yeah, whenever I think of crypto art, I think about a lot of the artists that were kind of pioneers that laid the foundation for everything we see today. You know, the ones that were attracted to the technology before even NFTs existed. Right? People like Josie, people like coin artists, people like Pascal Boyard, you know, I mean, these people, I mentioned those three specifically because they were creating crypto art before NFTs. You know, like Josie, as an example, was going to these exhibitions, these like crypto events, and just showcasing her paintings. And they were inspired by crypto. And so for me, I find that like those kind of stories the most inspiring because they show real belief. And they show belief that transcends just the financial aspect of it. You know, it came before the people, it came before all of the big hype, you know, before people really understood that there was potential to make money. So there's a purity there as well. And I know you, Scooter, I know you're a big fan of A Lot of Money. He's someone I consider to be a quintessential crypto artist. And his voice is something really missing today because I think he would counteract a lot of the things we've seen, a lot of the developments we've seen in the space. I think, again, it comes back to being brave and creating work that is true to who you are as an artist. And like, you know, A Lot of Money, he's touched on all kinds of subjects. He's touched on politics and he's never been afraid to do that, you know, and I think controversy is a big part of it, but I find maybe we're starting to lack that a little bit in the space. So when I look at the space today, I think of artists like Max Osiris. I think of people like Rob Ness still, you know, Gary Cartledge. I mentioned those three. To me, those three right now, in terms of active, engaged artists, are the beating heart of crypto art because they still embody that rebellious spirit. They don't care. They're not afraid to say things that are controversial. And I think the way you measure it is if those three guys didn't, let's say, exist in the space today, what would the space look like? So I know that's a very long, roundabout answer to your question. And it's really something I could probably talk about for hours.
Yeah, and I think it goes really well with your tweet from earlier this morning where you said that not every artist that mints work on the blockchain is a crypto artist and that not every crypto artist mints work on the blockchain.
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of wrote that with this discussion in mind, but also because I continue to see people misuse the term crypto art and they refer to things as crypto art that frankly is not crypto art. And it's funny to me because, you know, we've been here for years now and people still don't understand what that term really means. And that's why I kind of felt the need to say that because, you know, I would say over 90% of art that we see in the NFT space is not crypto art. But at the same time, you have artists like Crypto Graffiti creates crypto art that isn't minted on the blockchain. So it would be unfair to just assume that crypto art can only exist on the blockchain. I don't think that's true. And I don't think it has to. And actually, I could even make the argument that someone like A Weiwei is more of a crypto artist than the majority of artists in our space, right? Even though you wouldn't think that. But it comes back to what I was saying earlier in terms of spirit, ethos, courage. Because at the end of the day, what's the point of crypto? It's not about money go up, right? It's about freedom go up. It's about autonomy, empowerment, sovereignty. It's about being anti-establishment. We're supposed to be against banks. We're not supposed to be celebrating banks entering the space. We're not supposed to be suddenly happy that a president launched a meme coin or that a BlackRock are launching ETFs. These are not things that are aligned with the true ideals of crypto. And I think that that translates to the art space too. Like when I see artists that are celebrated in the space go and talk at the World Economic Forum, I mean, it's almost complete opposite of what crypto art should be about. And so, yeah, I felt the need to say that again today.
What led you to begin collecting crypto art ohms?
It's funny. I mean, it's cliche to say it, but I mean, I literally did come for the art. And the first piece of crypto art I collected was a physical. And I found it by pure coincidence. I was following Going Parabolic and Pump. I was following these guys because I started to have an interest in crypto. And they were participating in an auction for Bitcoin Bull by Trevor Jones. And this was in 2020. And I really thought, oh, wow, I thought that was a really cool piece. And then I started following Trevor, and then he released a print of that piece, like a limited edition, 21 of that print, and I ended up collecting one. And then from there, he had a drop a few months later on Maker's Place in October 2020. And I really liked the piece. It was an edition again. And that was the first NFT I collected. So it was really out of curiosity, like a long-standing kind of appreciation for art and design and stuff like that. And then, yeah, once I got into it, I'm just like, I've never left, I kind of go hooked.
You recently wrote that what was once a movement that sought to disrupt a broken world is now a shadow of itself. What has changed since you first joined the crypto art space?
Oh, a lot of things. I mean, the first big inflection point was the Bored Ape phenomenon, right? That for me was the first real big turning point in the culture and the energy in the space, because then it really became about speculation. Up until that point, there was still naivety, there was still curiosity, there was still some purity. And I used to spend most of my time at that stage, like in the CryptoPunks Discord, because I'm not crypto native, I'm not a finance guy. So for me, that was like my education. That was like, lurking in the back of a classroom at some university and just listening to these really smart people have conversations. And that's kind of how I learned a lot about everything. So I think it just kind of evolved from there. So it started with the Bored Ape stuff, and then you saw that wave of speculation come into art blocks, and then eventually like one of ones, it also attracted artists. So we can't just, I think we have a tendency as well to villainize everyone except artists. And I'm like obviously a massive supporter of artists. For me, that's really what I care about, is empowering artists and supporting them whenever I can. But we also have to, be honest and say there were a lot of artists that came into the space for the money, they were very opportunistic. And so I think over time it kind of eroded the culture. And we started to see a lot more speculation. We started to see influencers emerge that were starting to leverage their position to control the narrative around the market, to dictate, let's say, evaluations of pricing and evaluation of quality and all these different things. And we still see that today. So that's continued. And so it's really diluted the culture. It's brought in an element of conformity, because when you have these really like influential people dictating things, and then you have the majority of people just following them, assuming that what they say is true, or following them because it's a safe choice and they think that it's like financially beneficial for them to do that, you start to see the same artists get hyped. You start to see things consolidate among very few artists. And you start to see like, and they like to describe this as power laws. And they try to justify and say that's how the traditional art world is, right? Which I find funny, because that was the whole point, right? I thought we were here to do things differently and to disrupt the old way. And that's one of the things I was referring to there. That I thought we were here to do new things. and to create a system that might work better and that might give, more opportunities for more artists all over the world. I didn't think we were just going to replicate what already existed, but actually make it even worse. Because it's actually even more concentrated in a space where all the discussion happens on a platform like Twitter and where influence is much more visible. It's actually, in many ways, worse than the traditional art world. So, and I think you see that. I think Art Gnome has touched on this before. I think there's a reason we don't see Art Gnome around as much, because it's disillusioning, right? Like when you start to see things like that, and then you see the influential people gaslight critics, gaslight anyone that speaks out. And I can give numerous examples. I mean, like, for example, the Taschen book is an example. Like, how do you create a book that's supposed to be a comprehensive historical record of the space and you don't have a lot of money in there? Like, I mean, there are a few other artists I'll mention, but like, you don't have a lot of money in there, and you had Vera Molnar in there, and you had like 90% of the book was generative art. I'm like, sorry, generative art? That has nothing to do with crypto art. That has nothing to do with the culture. Generative arts existed for decades before NFTs. It doesn't require blockchain to exist. It has nothing to do with it. So why are we trying to reposition the narrative away from the principles that actually gave birth to this whole space and make it more about abstract generative art? So that's what I've seen as someone who's very passionate about the ideals of the space, who's very passionate about the promise of empowering individual artists and using this technology to create new opportunities for artists all over the world. When I see that actually what we're doing is recreating what exists in the traditional art world and actually doing it worse, and then having people kind of try to justify all of it. Yeah, I mean, I do see it as a shadow of itself. I do see it as moving very far away from where it was originally headed.
You've said that crypto art is important because it expresses our resistance. Why does this matter, and what are we rebelling against?
I mean, I think the world is becoming more and more dystopian. And I think, we talk about AI art, but let's talk about AI. Let's talk about how AI can be used to surveil, control, police, suppress populations. Let's talk about how AI is used in wars overseas to target and kill people. I mean, to me, like, there are a lot of issues that are going to be emerging now and into the future that are going to be things that threaten our freedom as people, threaten our livelihood, threaten the future of our children. And, and to me, like, when we have a technology like the blockchain that allows for permissionless censorship, resistance, expression of ideals and art and things like that, then why not use it? Why not use it to document your resistance, your kind of your opposition to all of these forces? Like, to me, it's the perfect marriage, and that's why I see it that way. And so, like, when I see things happening around the world that are, I don't know, maybe I'm idealistic, but I always think about also part of crypto art to me, and I see it as a bastion of resistance in the art world because it's new, because it's unattached to existing kind of power structures, because it gives a voice to artists from all over the world who aren't tied to traditional institutions, right? So to me, it's like I almost see it like a way to express, to fight back against injustice. I think of it that way as well. I mean, I remember, like, when the George Floyd thing happened, a lot of artists created pieces inspired by that. Like Josie had a really iconic piece that she created. And, so I think of those examples and I think we're losing it. I think we're losing that now. I think artists are much more afraid to express these kind of ideas. I think we're kind of trying to be more politically correct. They're trying to avoid saying things that are controversial. And I think that's a big loss because I do genuinely see crypto art as, like a movement. I use that word a lot when I describe it. I don't see it as a space. I see it as a movement because it's a place where we can express so much and we can record it for posterity. It can be recorded on the blockchain permanently and nobody can take that away from us. And that's kind of why I see it that way.
Let's dive into some collecting related questions. You wrote that true collecting is a personal journey with the fulfillment coming from the act itself. What makes this journey meaningful for you?
Several aspects. I mean, aside from connecting with the work itself, I think one of the things that is unique about this space is your ability as a collector to connect directly with artists, to have conversations with them. I think that's something that's underappreciated. For me, that's probably the most fulfilling part of my collecting journey and experience. I see a piece I'm interested in, or I see, like, let's say a series or a collection of pieces, reach out to the artist, start asking them questions, learn about their story, learn about their process, learn about their inspiration and their vision and all these things. And then you start to get, once you have that, you build a human connection with someone. And you realize, and I say this also from my own experience, every artist, every artist is a dreamer, right? Why are they here? Okay, of course they want to make money, but the reality is they have a dream and they're pursuing that dream. And you as a collector are in a unique position to play a role in that, even if it's small. I don't think you can have a bigger impact on another person's life than playing a role or supporting them in pursuing their dream. It's a very powerful relationship, a very powerful bond that you can build with another person. And I think this space is uniquely it accommodates that in a very unique way, because I don't have to go to a gallery. I don't have to go through brokers. I can literally message someone on Twitter. And this may be the good, the bright side of Twitter, right? Is that I can message someone directly, have these conversations. And then when I collect the piece from them, in addition to like loving the piece, all of a sudden there's an extra element to it. There's like a little bit of magic to it now, because now I know, okay, I have this connection, represents this relationship I've just forged with this artist. And so, yeah, that's another way I think of a lot of the pieces I've collected as not just art. I think of them as relationships. So and that's the thing that I find most inspiring about that's probably the only reason I'm still here in the space and I haven't like rage quit and like disappeared, is because it's because of those relationships and the relationships to come, you know? So that's how, yeah, that's the big part of the journey that I really enjoy.
Yeah, and following up on that, you said that there is something magical about knowing that you're helping someone pursue their dreams. What role do you think collectors play in shaping the story of an artist?
I'm not sure we should shape the story so much as give them the platform to tell their story and give them and kind of help them have the confidence and self-belief that they should be telling their story, that their story is worth telling. Because a lot of artists, I think, lack the self-belief. And self-belief is a critical ingredient. If you want to be successful in anything, you need to believe in yourself. And sometimes you need someone to believe in you first. Before you develop that belief in yourself, you need someone to kickstart that for you. So I think that's a really underrated role collectors can play, because I'll tell you, like, as an example, sometimes you don't have to collect something from an artist to impact them. You can just have a conversation with them, say, you know, ask them inquisitive questions about their process, show genuine curiosity and interest, and compliment them. 5 minutes, 10-minute conversation like that will give an artist such a boost, even without you spending a penny, right? And I think that's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. So you can almost play the role, I would almost like a mentor, but like someone that's kind of like a guardian, someone that more like trying to like give them the kind of the platform to go and do their, to go and do their thing and pursue their dream and all that, with knowing that they have people that believe in them.
Most collectors in this space focus on acquiring multiple works from a small number of artists, and you don't take this approach. What motivates you to collect works from such a wide range of creators?
It's partially the thing I mentioned earlier, which is building relationships and connecting. And like, yeah, for me, it's also like if I meet artists who have really interesting stories and stuff, I'd like to collect a piece from them so I can find and almost stay connected with them, but also be a part of their journey. So it goes back to that. I think it really depends. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to approach it. So in my case, it's really like a response to the art that I see first and foremost. If I see stuff I like, then I'll dig in from there. So within some cases, I've collected multiple works. If you go, I mean, I think like I don't know, I probably own 20 or 30 one-of-ones from Max, Osiris. I know I own a bunch from like Norman Harmon, and so there are artists that I do collect multiple from, but it's because I love the work. So it's really first and foremost the response to the work itself, but then secondarily it's also you know buying a ticket on their journey, on different artists' journeys.
I like that metaphor. We get to be involved in their voyage and form a relationship, as you've mentioned. You've also suggested that a lot of collecting is actually just speculation. What qualities do true collectors possess that you find lacking in speculators?
Well, first thing is ability to think for themselves and to have the confidence to follow their instincts. I think it's a combination. I don't think it's a taste issue. I think that's kind of a misunderstanding. I think you develop taste. I think it's a confidence issue for most people because they don't believe that they can identify work, or that the work that they like might be considered quote unquote good by everyone else. So there is a self-conscious aspect. And I mean, I've said this before and I believe it, like even collectors experience imposter syndrome. We're insecure as well. Like we're insecure about our choices. What if we're collecting stuff that, other people might laugh at and say, like, how could you spend that on that? Like it's a genuine thing. So I understand when a lot of collectors, maybe I should call them investors, would rather follow the crowd, would rather collect from like a one of 1,000 art blocks collection, which is more liquid and less risky than a one of one on, like from an individual artist. So I think that the real, like I mean, the real collectors, the ones I admire the most, have confidence, have self-confidence, are willing to bet on their taste, take bets on their taste, also have the ability to really spot interesting stories. Because at the end of the day, like art is storytelling, another way of thinking about it. It's the ability to move and shift emotion and inspire you and impact you. And so I think like the collector I admire the most, what I consider to be by far the best collector in the space, is Token Angels. Token Angels has a gift. He's able to identify stories and narratives before anyone else. He can look at an artist, he can look at their body of work, and he can immediately see he can develop a vision of what that's going to look like in the future. And that's why he's always early on things. He also has confidence and he's completely oblivious to what the market likes, doesn't pay attention to any of that, focuses on his own, on his own instincts. And so I think those are the kind of elements I think about when I really look at and it's not just someone like Tokenators, maybe let's say high profile. There are a lot of smaller, not smaller, but let's say less prominent collectors who have great eye for art. They just may not have the budget as big a budget as other people, or as big a following as other people. As a collector, you pay attention. You know who they are. So you follow them because again, it's confidence. It all comes back to that confidence, and confidence in identifying what you like and being willing to back that up by paying for it.
You talked about collectors suffering from imposter syndrome and sometimes, doubting your choices. Is there like a checklist that you go through when you're looking at a work and considering acquiring it?
It's not that systematic for me, but definitely it's evolved. I came into this space not knowing really much about art or really being an art collector. So I got my education on the blockchain. And so my collection reflects that. So you can see how I evolved with what I collected, let's say late 2020, to what I collect, let's say last year. There's an evolution. I'm much more like, let's say, I take much more time now over what I collect. I sit with a piece for like weeks before I decide to collect it, unless it's something I already know I really wanted to collect and it became available. I think probably the majority of it comes back to the artist. So rather than have a checklist, what I'll do is, if it's an artist I've never met before, I'm not aware of, I'll start a conversation with them. I'll get to know them. I'll ask them some questions. I'll learn. I'm always curious to learn about process, especially now. I have a lot more AI involved in art creation. So I like to understand how artists are using AI in creative ways, how they're doing it in ways that's, let's say, unique, different, thoughtful. So it comes back to that. It comes back to gut feeling, though. I think for me, it's still a gut feel kind of. If I find myself lying awake, dreading the idea of another collector collecting a piece that I like, that's when I know I need to buy. I need to collect it.
Sleepless nights equals collecting. I like that. You talked about a few artists that stand out to you. You mentioned Josie, Pascal Boyard, A Lot of Money, Rob Ness. Are there particular works of art that you view as an essential part of the story of crypto art?
That's tough. There are many. It's always hard to hone in on individual works. There are, I always come back to, for some reason, I always come back to First Supper on async art for a few reasons. One, because I think it embodied the spirit of collaboration and togetherness. The idea that you had like a few artists come together and collaborate on a piece like that, I thought really said something about about the ideals of crypto art. Because before all of the speculation, how did the ecosystem, how did the community sustain itself? Artists were collecting from each other. There was a togetherness. There was if I make a sale, I'll collect from others. That was kind of like built into the fabric of the community, and that's kind of been lost now. And so I always come back to First Supper for that reason. Not because I love the piece necessarily, like as an art piece, but because of what it represents, the people that were involved. I think that that's a very iconic piece. But there are so many. I mean, Filter by Josie is a huge one. I think some of Coldie's work, Decentralize. Max has a few pieces. Rob Ness obviously has a few pieces with his trash art, which I think is an important crypto art, like kind of, it's a subgenre, that because again, it embodied some of that spirit and those values. And Max is a big part of that people forget. Max, I'm going to digress for a minute, but when I first came into the space at the time, Max, Rob Ness, and Second Realm, Eric Rhodes, were all banned from Super Rare. And that was something that was shocking to me, right? Because I'm coming into the space, they're telling me it's decentralization, they're telling me freedom, they're telling me all this stuff. And then you have these three artists that are banned from a platform. Made no sense. So I reached out to Rob Ness and Max. And at the time, I think, I don't know, maybe had 100 followers. I was nobody, new to the space. To show you the kindness and the like how genuine these guys are, they both gave me their time. They both sat with me, probably bored the shit out of them, excuse my language, but I interviewed them for 2 hours, like literally 2 hours each. And they were patient, they listened to me, they talked to me, they gave me their time. I never forget it. And that's why those two guys always have like my undying loyalty, because they were kind to me at a time when they didn't have to be. And I know I'm digressing, but it comes back to like there's a work that Max minted that got him banned. I can't remember. It's like For Edit Love or something. It's owned by Billy Whistler. It's on Super Rare. That to me is a very special piece. And it's a very random one to mention, but it's a very special piece because I consider that story to be quintessential crypto art. And so that piece for me is something that it's one of the pieces that if you gave me an unlimited budget, I could track down Billy Whistler. Like that would be something I would really love to collect. Matt Cain, Right Place, Right Time, I think is another piece that's really special. These are people. I mean, Josie, I mentioned Filter. A Lot of Money has a few pieces, like Saint Nakamoto's collaboration with Da Vinci. That's such an iconic piece. I know I'm gonna forget people. That's why I don't like answering questions like that. But there are a few. I mean, let's say more recently, there's an artist who I'm a big fan of. It's not a secret at this point, but James Bloom was by Crash Blossom. He's done more like, it's like blockchain native, you could say. It's more like playing with blockchain as a medium, dynamic art, stuff like that. Some of his stuff that he's done, like Burner collection he did called Burner, I find like, for me, it's one of the most iconic kind of collections. I'd say not as a one of one, as a collection. It's one of the most iconic I've seen. And I consider that to be crypto art, even though it's conceptual, you could say more abstract. But yeah, I mean, there's another piece. Let's say, Crypto Chromo is another artist I think that's done some really good stuff in the past. Like he has a piece called Skeletal Garden, which I actually own that piece. It's very special to me, but also it has a story behind that as well. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, there's a long list. Luckily, most of those artists are still around.
Thanks for walking us through that. It is always precarious to start mentioning anyone, but I know that's not in a spirit of leaving folks out, but in illustrating some of what is meaningful within works that have been created. Cryptoart was founded on values of decentralization, freedom from intermediaries, and fair compensation for artists, all of which have come under pressure over the past few years, as you've mentioned. How can artists and collectors reclaim some of the original values of this movement?
It's a tough one because unfortunately you see the space moving further and further away from that because the people that are kind of controlling the narrative now don't really want to go back to that. And so I think almost the space has to kind of, you have to create a movement within a movement. I think those people, those artists, those collectors that still prize those ideals, I think eventually they're just going to have to come together and say, you know what, we're going to just do this on our own. We're going to build our own movement in parallel, and we're going to rekindle those values. Because I mean, and I think it's worthwhile to do that because to me it's such an important set of ideals. And I think about like if let's say my son wanted to become an artist in 15 years, what world would I want him to enter? What options would I want him to have available to him? Would I want him to be aspiring for a Sotheby's auction or to be included in a book? Or would I want him to be able to have his own contract, his own website, to be able to collaborate with other artists, to be able to express himself freely without worrying about being blacklisted or censored or whatever? It's very clear. It's very clear for me what option I would favor. And so I think it's something where you kind of have to just kind of rebuild the community around those shared beliefs and values.
Appreciate those thoughts, particularly that concept of a movement within a movement. That seems quite apt. Anyone who may be interested in starting or adding to a collection of crypto art, what advice would you give to them to steer them in the right direction?
Take the time to learn the history. There are resources. Emlo is a great resource. He's done a ton of really good research and documented a lot of that history. Artgnome has written some of that. Talk to the artists that have been around. Go meet them. Like talk to them. They're all receptive, and most of them are still here. So I would say learn the history, talk to people, reach out to collectors too. Collectors are generally receptive and will talk to you and will walk you through some of that. I think it's important to understand the history. It's important to understand the philosophy and then to decide what resonates with you. At the end of the day, if you're not interested in crypto art, don't collect crypto art. Don't force yourself to collect something that maybe you're more suited to, like, I don't know, generative art. If that's the case, do whatever suits you. At the end of the day, collecting is a personal journey, right? You got to do what resonates with you. But yeah, I would say take advantage of the people and the resources and the research and history and use that to guide you.
An understanding of the history is critical to know what meaningful works are being created today and what might appear on the horizon. Ohms, thank you so much for being with us today. Your voice is one that is thoughtful, authentic, and demonstrates courage by speaking truth to power. We're really grateful for the leadership you show in reminding us why the crypto art movement matters.
It's a real pleasure. I love the work that you guys are doing. I think it's very important. It's important to remind ourselves about these values and to shed a light on that. So thank you for having me on, and anything I can do to support, collaborate, I'm always available to you.
Thank you, Ohms. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a review. And keep an eye out for the next episode of The Collector's Call.